Sally Field has just broken everything you ever knew about Forrest Gump. For 3 decades, she held a secret so heartbreaking it would make you see one of Hollywood's best-loved movies in an anthology all over again. As millions rejoiced with her as the ideal mother figure in the tale, Field silently suffered something that would shatter the majority. The job that the public perceived as being one of the career highlights was, for her, realizing she had been given a career death penalty, and she knew it from day one on the set. But the reality is that it was not about one casting choice or one film. What occurred to Sally Field during Forrest Gump revealed a dark, unspoken truth that all women in Hollywood sooner or later face, the point at which she is no longer deemed young enough, attractive enough, or current enough to occupy the center stage. When Field finally broke what had actually transpired behind those tear-jerking scenes, the world was compelled to reassess not just Mrs. Gump, but the system that placed her there. The truth wasn't only unjust, it was brutal. And the most cynical thing was that everybody in the business had simply taken it for absolutely normal. It was 1994, and Forrest Gump was already set to become a cultural phenomenon. Tom Hanks was about to deliver a performance for the ages, Robert Zemeckis was about to direct with unbridled vision, and the marriage of emotional storytelling and innovative special effects would soon turn the film into a generational phenomenon. To the masses, it was a tribute to courtesy, determination, and the American dream. But for one of its lead stars, that same endeavor had a secret price tag nobody anticipated. Sally Field, a performer already adorned with 2 Oscars, nearly departed the production before cameras even rolled. She had been in initial script talks when hesitations crept in, not because she believed the script was bad, but because she knew in her heart that taking the role would forever change the way Hollywood perceived her. The handwriting was already on the wall, and what it wrote scared her to death. Nevertheless, Hollywood has the ability to make some offers almost impossible to decline. Forrest Gump was Oscar material written all over it. Robert Zemeckis was riding high from Back to the Future success. Tom Hanks was already being talked about as Best Actor frontrunner, and Paramount was investing big in this quirky but sweet script. For any actor, being invited to be a part of such a picture would be akin to being offered a golden ticket. But Field, who stood towering over most of her peers, couldn't help but feel that this was no gift. It was a trap. And yet she took it. As she stepped onto the set, she did so as not some up-and-coming actress hoping to get a leg up, but as Hollywood royalty. This was the woman who had ruled television with Gidget and The Flying Nun, then shocked critics by demonstrating her dramatic capabilities with Norma Rae and Places in the Heart. By the time Forrest Gump appeared, she was one of the most respected, awarded, and capable actresses in Hollywood. On paper, there was no way that she shouldn't have been overjoyed to play Mrs. Gump. Instead, her heart bottomed out. She knew right away what the part represented, and it haunted her. The script itself was strange and dangerous. No one knew if audiences would accept a film about a man with intellectual disabilities who stumbles through some of America's most significant historical events. But Field's reluctance wasn't actually about not knowing the tone or box office viability of the film. It was about what the casting decision said about her and about women in her position. She had been asked to play the mother of Tom Hanks, an actor who was, in reality, 10 years younger than her. Think about that for a moment. It's one thing to play slightly older than your years on screen. It's another to play the parent of someone who, in life, is something close to a peer. For Field, the numbers didn't work, but the symbolism did. At 47, she had been officially, if quietly, relegated to the mother category. That clicked in her mind like a punch. Hollywood's unspoken rules had long dictated that women are only romantic leads for so long. By 40, the transition typically occurs, abrupt and merciless. In an instant, women who were previously hailed for their depth and hotness are relegated to maternal, sage, or background roles. Their male counterparts, meanwhile, continue to star in action flicks, romance, and dramas well into their 60s, 70s, even 80s. For Field, this was more than a role. It was the industry sending her a message. You're done as a leading lady. From now on, you're the mother, not the star. The irony was suffocating. Sally Field needed the work. She wanted to be part of something important. And yet she knew deep down that saying yes would alter her career trajectory forever. So she smiled, acquiesced, and embarked upon what would be one of her favorite performances, despite the fact that each successive scene sliced her more painfully than the previous. To play Mrs. Gump was not only acting. It was performing while at the same time grieving the loss of an entire chapter of herself. And yet, still, the casting choice went unchecked by producers and studio executives. No one in the room found it peculiar that a woman a few years younger than her co-star was being asked to play his mother. No one raised an eyebrow at the ridiculousness because Hollywood had conditioned the world so well that it was just accepted as normal. Everyone assumed it. Women a certain age only lived to support male stories, never in their own. As shooting started, Field's inner turmoil only grew stronger. Robert Zemeckis was demanding, painstaking, and unyielding in his vision. His perfectionist direction translated into working long hours, doing retakes, and making endless changes. Field frequently found herself in conflict with him concerning Mrs. Gump's emotional center. She imagined the character one way, he imagined her another. Their arguments were sometimes fierce, creating a tense environment. But, ironically, that artistic conflict added to the richness of her performance. Field has since acknowledged that some of her finest work in the film resulted from those fights, although they exhausted her emotionally. Her working relationship with Tom Hanks was similarly fraught. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, but their methods of acting could not have been more disparate. Hanks was spontaneous, natural, allowing charisma and rhythmic sense to inform his performance. Field, on the other hand, spent hours breaking down every beat, every emotional shift. That difference created an imbalance that she grappled with. To the audience, it appeared to be perfect harmony. Behind the cameras, it was like two players playing in slightly different keys. What nagged Field most was not the technical aspect of acting, but what the role symbolized. She threw herself into playing Mrs. Gump's warm wisdom, at times basing her scenes on her own life. As a mother, she brought warmth, toughness, and love to the character while privately lamenting the reality that Hollywood had now squarely relegated her to mom roles. Reciting the famous line regarding life and a box of chocolates, she understood she was also addressing her own professional life, unpredictable, bittersweet, and here, cruelly ironic. The shoot was arduous. There were days Field feared the film would not even be made. The narrative was so odd, the tone so fine, that she worried it would fail. But when the film came out, all fears disappeared. Forrest Gump burst into a cultural phenomenon. It became one of the most quoted, most cherished movies ever made. Tom Hanks swept the Oscars, Robert Zemeckis secured his place in cinematic history, and Mrs. Gump's wise quietudes became legendary. For the public, Sally Field's performance was unforgettable. For Field herself, it was a mixed blessing that verified her worst fears. As the accolades came in, she was caught in an odd emotional contradiction. She was proud of her achievement and moved by the audience's affection for Mrs. Gump, but she could not help feeling that she had helped ratify the same system that had belittled her. Each compliment regarding how great maternal she looked was, to her, a reminder that Hollywood no longer perceived her as a woman who could tell her own tale. The awards season only hammered the point home further. Hanks took Best Actor, and the industry praised his genius. Field wasn't even nominated. His growth was deemed remarkable. Hers, on the other hand, was handled as expected. Natural, just a mother being a woman. For 30 years, she held these emotions in private. For the public, she spoke well of the film, attended retrospectives, smiled for interviews. But privately, she bore the burden of what it had cost her. It wasn't until she started writing her memoirs and looking back at her career with the kind of clarity that hindsight can bring that she actually put into words the hurt. The silence had been partly self-preservation, partly respect for the legacy of the film, and partly because it took her years to untangle her own complex feelings about it all. When she finally came clean, she didn't give just a behind-the-scenes anecdote. She opened up a systemic issue that Hollywood had kept well hidden in plain sight for decades. To be cast as the mother of a man a decade younger wasn't strange. It was emblematic of an industry that ruthlessly dispenses with female talent. Field's admission made people think twice about what they had witnessed. Mrs. Gump's sagacity was not acting. It was the expression of genuine frustration, genuine sorrow, and genuine ire at being shoved aside. Her admission wasn't for herself alone, though. She articulated that her narrative was the narrative of all the women of Hollywood. For every Sally Field who continued to get work as a mother, there were dozens of other talented women who simply disappeared from films after crossing that intangible threshold of being too old for romance. It wasn't personal, it was structural. That was the heartlessness of it. The moment of her public coming out was timely for Hollywood because Hollywood itself was undergoing wider accountings in matters of representation, equity, and ageism. Her tale was a tangible, intensely human illustration of the way systemic prejudice translates to careers sidetracked and hopes shattered. It wasn't an out-there ideal, it was lived, and Field, with her unparalleled honesty, compelled others to look. By linking her professional hurt to her subsequent activism, whether she was marching for climate justice, advocating for LGBTQ rights, or getting arrested for something she felt strongly about, Field illustrated that telling truth, even if it pains, can change lives. The woman who smiled through injustice became a woman who did not hesitate to speak up, even if it meant going against an entire sector. The response to her confession was one of shock, understanding, and contemplation. Most people conceded that they had never even been aware of the age disparity between her and Hanks, evidence of how routine the trend had become. Some employed her account as a clarion call for change, noting that if this was allowed to occur to as skilled and acclaimed an actress as Sally Field, then it was occurring to many women without such prominence or power. Most profoundly, her words transformed the way audiences understood Forrest Gump. The famous chocolate box wisdom now carried an added layer of meaning. Life is unpredictable, yes, but for Field, those words were infused with the bitterness of having been forced to accept Hollywood's cruel hand. That knowledge doesn't ruin the movie. It makes it richer, more complex, and, in a strange way, even more moving. Sally Field made her tragedy an art, and her silence speak the truth. By finally shattering 30 years of silence endurance, she altered not just the way we look at Forrest Gump, but the way we look at Hollywood and women. It might just be the most significant part she's ever acted. Not Mrs. Gump, but Sally Field herself, standing up to let the machine tell her story with her having a voice. And when you see her on screen today, you're not seeing a performer recite words. You're seeing a woman who endured pain with dignity, turned it into insight, and ultimately became a voice so that future generations may not have to.